Mrs Frances Ruscombe and her maid were most barbarously murdered at her house on College Green, Bristol, in the open day by persons unknown, who robbed the house and carried off money to a considerable amount. Mrs Ruscombe was found with her throat cut, a wound in her mouth, one of her eyes beat out, and her skull beat into the brain. The maid was found with her head almost severed from her body, her jaw broke, a violent blow to her forehead, and her skull cleaved as with a wedge. Hello and welcome. So today's video is about a murder case from the 18th century, and even though there were lots of suspects in this case, no one has ever been found guilty of the murder, and the case remains unsolved to this day. When Mrs Jefferies visited her sister's house at 12 noon on Thursday the 27th of September 1764, she did not expect the scene she was greeted with. Upon arriving at the house on College Green, Bristol, Mrs Jefferies found the front door unlocked. Upon entering the house, she found the most horrific scene. She found her sister, Frances Ruscombe, lying on the stairs dead. Her throat had been cut and she had a wound on her head that had caused her skull to be pushed into her brain. In the back parlour was Frances's maid, Mary Champness, also known as Mary Sweets. She too was dead, with her head almost severed from her body and a head injury. Their murders had only happened within the last hour, as both bodies were still warm. The motive did not at first seem to be robbery, as it seemed that nothing had been taken, though a mess had been made. Though the murders had happened during the day, no one reported hearing anything strange. They had not seen anyone suspicious, even though it was likely that a blood-spattered person left the house through the front door. Frances and Mary were duly buried. Frances in the chancel of St Stephen's and Mary at St Augustine the Less. The violence and savagery of the murders shocked the local community. As there was no police force at the time to do any real investigating, an award was the best way to get information about who the murderer was. An award of £100 was offered to be paid on conviction, to which Frances's husband James added another £10. More information about the murders came out. The Bristol Journal reports that items were indeed stolen from Frances's home. The paper reports a statement from Frances's sisters, Elizabeth and Sarah. They said that the murderer went upstairs into a closet where they broke open a trunk and took out papers plus 57 guineas tied up in a bag marked with the letter I, and a silver purse containing 36 shilling pieces and 21 guineas. Elizabeth and Sarah offered another 50 guineas to the reward money in the hope that someone would come forward with information about their sister's murder, but no one did. On the 6th of October, the Member of Parliament for Bristol, Robert Nugent, added another £100 to the reward money, and then King George III became involved, offering a royal pardon to any accomplice who would give evidence. Many people were questioned about Frances and Mary's murders, but all were released without charge. On the 13th October, a letter was found that had apparently been written by Frances. The letter had supposedly been dropped at a turnpike in Devizes, Wiltshire, by two sailors who had gone through it. The sailors were taken before Mr Justice Popham, where they were questioned, but both of them had a provable alibi for when the murders happened, so were let go. The letter was analysed, and it was determined that the handwriting was not that of Frances Ruscombe's and therefore a hoax. On the 20th of October, a rumour went around that the landlord of a pub in Bedminster, Bristol, had suddenly left in a coach acting suspiciously. Someone said that they had heard the landlord say to the coachman to stick to the side lanes. Excited and wound up by this news, a crowd of people went to Plymouth, Devon, to get the landlord and bring him back to Bristol. Once back in Bristol, it was found out that the landlord had actually left the area the day before the murders. The 27th of October brought a new suspect. A neighbour of Mrs Ruscombe's reported seeing the maid Mary arguing with a man in the street. Believing that they were having a lover's quarrel, a former lover of Mary's was arrested. He protested his innocence, saying that he was not the man from the street and that he had not seen Mary since February. He was released. At the beginning of November, a girl who was a traveller with a tinker and his troll was questioned. She said that she was a fortune teller and that she had information on the murders, but the story she gave was proven to be false. On the 10th of November, pawnbrokers were alerted to keep a lookout when a silver snuff box was added to the list of items taken from Frances's, but no one tried to sell the snuff box to them. The press lost interest in the double murder until April the next year, and Mrs Wilson had been suspected of the murder of a tollgate man and also that of her illegitimate child. She had been cleared of both charges, but people still suspected that she was guilty. Because of this, she was questioned about the murders of Frances and Mary. For some reason, Mrs Wilson thought that she ought to say something about the murders, so started going on about some salt cellars that belonged to Frances Ruscombe. These salt cellars did not exist, and because of other things she said were proven to be false, she was released. The authorities didn't question anyone else about the murders, but more rumours did go round. It was rumoured that baker Peaceable Robert Matthews was guilty. It is said that Matthews confessed to the Reverend Sayer, who broke the rule of the confessional and told the Vicar of Temple. The vicar then told someone else, and that person told another person, and so on. The Reverend John Caspend gave Matthews his last rites on his deathbed and thought that if Matthew was really guilty of the murders, he would confess on his deathbed. And when Matthews did not confess, Caspend published a pamphlet called A Vindication of Peaceable Robert Matthews for a charge of Mrs Ruscombe's murder, lately revised against him. Right, so you may have noticed that one person that was not actually questioned about Frances's murder was her husband, James. Now, he was a respectable person. He was the son of a landowner in Somerset. So did they think that he was too respectable to have murdered his wife? So if we say it was not James that murdered his wife, then who did? One theory that has been put forward is that the maid Mary was actually involved. It is suggested in bristolhistory.co.uk that knowing that there was all this money in the house, Mary had arranged for the man that she had been talking to on the street to burgle the house. Mary would have let him into the house, which was why there was no break-in and that the front door was open. But while he was burgling the house, he had been discovered by Frances and ended up killing her. So not actually expecting for her boss to have been killed, Mary was obviously panicked about this, so her accomplice killed her as well. He then left the house with the stolen items, but it still doesn't explain why no one saw a man leave the house in bloodstained clothing, unless he stole some of James's clothes and then carried his stuff out in a bag. But no men's clothes were actually reported stolen from the house. So there's a 260-year-old unsolved murder. Who do you reckon could have murdered Mrs Ruscombe and her maid Mary? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.